Welcome, everyone. We're still having people join, so we want to just kind of give a little moment there. I'm going to do a little introduction. Some of you who have attended previously, this will be what you've seen before. Thank you for bearing with that. But this is the Earthquake Country Alliance's Public Sector Committee's Community Engagement Webinar Series. And this is the third webinar. And here's the website where you can find the recording of today's webinar once it is posted at earthquakecountry.org/community, as well as our past webinars. The Earthquake Country Alliance is a statewide partnership of public and private and grassroots leaders from all across the state. Some work together as part of statewide sector-based committees that develop resources and deliver programs like today's webinar. Many then also participate regionally in regional alliances in Southern California, the Central Coast, the Bay Area, and the North Coast, which is a partner called the Redwood Coast Tsunami Work Group. Cal OES provides FEMA funding for the activities that is headquartered and administered out of USC and the Southern California Earthquake Center, where I'm based. By the way, my name is Mark Benthian. I'm the Director for Communication, Education, and Outreach for the Southern California Earthquake Center. And I'm joined by Sharon Sandow, who is our Assistant Director for Strategic Partnerships and Deputy Director of Earthquake Country Alliance, and many others on our team at SCEC that support ECA. You can join the Earthquake Country Alliance. They're on that webpage there, earthquakecountry.org/alliance. We'll start to put these links into the chat also to make it easier for you to just click and go and join the ECA during the meeting. Okay, our statewide activities include our website at earthquakecountry.org, also in Spanish at terremotos.org. We support Tsunami Preparedness Week in March through a website called tsunamizone.org, and /California is specifically for California, but that is for other states and territories and the Caribbean and other places where tsunamis happen. And you can find out if you are in a tsunami zone, if you're near the coast, if you're actually in potential inundation zone, and get other resources and information there. And we, back in 2008, created the Shakeout and coordinated statewide. It's of course expanded across the country and around the world. That's coordinated by our home base at the Southern California Earthquake Center, with many other states and regional partners in other countries. A key message or way that we organize our messaging is the 7 steps to earthquake safety, what to do before, during, and after. And you can find web pages for those on both sites, earthquakecountry.org/7steps and terremotos.org/siete pasos. Last year, we had a webinar series about each of those steps, and you can find that at earthquakecountry.org/saferatHome. All of these you can get to just from the homepage. You'll see links to the webinar series, about the Alliance, and the 7 steps. So if you just remember earthquakecountry.org, you're good to go. I mentioned the sector-based outreach committees that we have, the Public Sector Committee, which is hosting today's webinar, but we do have others. And if you're interested in participating in any of these or in our regional efforts, please do reach out to us for these committees. You can go to earthquakecountry.org/committees, or in your survey for today's webinar, you can indicate your interests and provide your information there too. Sharon, if you maybe want to put your email address into the chat, that's another way you can email Sharon, and you can then, or info@earthquakecountry.org, as I'll show at the end. And that's another way to communicate with us. Okay, so thank you, Sharon. Everybody, make sure you're looking at the chat. There may be links and information and discussions happening concurrent to the meeting. I'd like to now introduce the chair of our public sector committee for ECA, and that is Crisanta Gonzalez, the Community Preparedness and Engagement Planning Division Chief. Is that still correct? I know that you maybe have recently changed positions, but I don't know if that was inclusive of this. With the Los Angeles City Emergency Management Department. Crisanta.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to have just a wonderful workshop presentation today. Thank you all of you who joined. We have a great amount of participants, and I think you're really going to enjoy today's topic. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Mark. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Crisanta. And this is a really great partnership between, in this webinar, between the City of Los Angeles and the City of San Francisco. That's one thing that we really are trying to do with the Public Sector Committee in particular, is form these partnerships. So if you're with a city or county or state or any other public sector organization, please do consider being a part of that group. Committees meet every 2 months for an hour and do some work in between, so it's not a heavy lift, and we would love your participation. So with that, our speaker today, as announced, is one last thing. Again, our earthquakecountry.org/community webpage does have the information and recordings of the 2 previous webinars. The first one featured Inyo County's Teen CERT program, Community Emergency Response Team program, and the Topanga Coalition for Emergency Preparedness, which has been around for many years and does a lot of great work in their community. So be sure to go and check out that webinar if you did not see it. The recording is on the page. And then in July, also 2 programs, the City of LA Ready Your LA Neighborhood Program, or RYLAN, and that, of course, part of a big program that Crisanta is involved with and spoke about, and also the Humboldt County CERT program and one of their local CERT teams. So the recording of those webinars are on this page. And with that, we'll turn over to Daniel Homsey, the City and County of San Francisco Neighborhood Empowerment Network Director, also a chair of the ECA Bay Area Regional Alliance. Thank you, Daniel, and you can start sharing, and hopefully we'll turn that over to you.
Great. 1 second, and we'll be set here. Hopefully this all works. Mark, are we set?
Yes.
Yes, great. Well, good morning, Mark, and thank you for the warm introduction. And I just want to acknowledge the great work of Crisanta. If any of you haven't taken the time to check out the RYLAN website, it's really great. And so I spent some time on there yesterday doing some research, and so many great ideas coming out of the Los Angeles area that I just appreciate her leadership and her participating in today's call. And I think I'm gonna stretch and join that group, because if she's running it, I'm sure it's amazing. So again, Daniel Homsey with the City and County of San Francisco. Some of you may have heard about our work or seen earlier presentations about our work in San Francisco. And to be honest, the reason why I'm here today isn't necessarily just to perhaps introduce folks to the work we're doing in the city, but also share with you some exciting news, which is that I think all of us on the preparedness side of this work believe in this work. We know it's important. We know it makes a difference. But honestly, I think we also run into a bit of a challenge sometimes, because, at certain points, some people say, well, can you prove it works? Like, do you have any data? Like, you're spending this money, you're out in the community, we get it, but is it making a difference? And the bottom line is that we just completed an assessment of how our programs performed during the pandemic, and we're really excited about the data. And why we're excited is because our work is based on the whole community approach. And so many of the preparedness programs across this country, such as RYLAN, are also based on the whole community approach. And I would offer the data we're going to share today not only defends the investments we're making in San Francisco, but I think defends the investment that folks like Crisanta are making in Los Angeles as well. And I was just lucky enough to have relationships in place with some universities to do the work. But the reality is, I'm sure the preparedness work across this country did make a difference during the pandemic. So today I share that data, not just in celebration of the work in San Francisco, but of all the work of the folks on this call that are doing community preparedness work and really committed to the whole community approach, which we all know is advanced by Craig Fugate, Rich Sereno, and David Kaufman out of FEMA in a few years in the past. So just quickly establishing a baseline. So the Neighborhood Empowerment Network, yeah, we are all about equity. We all know that all ships need to rise with the tide. And during times of stress, we can see that not everyone has the same opportunities to do so. And so our investments from a readiness standpoint need to focus on that. And my cat Monkey is very committed. Yes, thank you, Monkey, for that voice of support. She's locked in here with me for the next hour, so I hope everyone enjoys it. My face will not turn into a cat though, so don't get too excited. So how did it all start? New Orleans, 2007, Back to the Future. And of course, on the heels of Hurricane Ida, it seems like every few years we're reminded about what happened in 2007 in New Orleans. I was lucky enough to be deployed down there with the city administrator and then Mayor Ed Lee, who had a real focus on social justice and equity in his life. And when he went to New Orleans, he was struck by the imbalance of what he saw. First of all, what he did recognize is that what happened in New Orleans could happen in San Francisco if you just change it from earthquake to flood. The same kind of impacts: homes destroyed or knocked off their foundations, people dislocated. Really, frankly, it's only a matter of time, and thereby the phrase "thereby the grace of God go I." This image is an image that I feel strongly we always need to focus on. This image, of course, is a 6,000-pound car on its back with a 12,000-pound house on top of it. It kind of looks like an art piece, but the truth is that we need to recognize that this is in the 9th Ward. And those of us remember that fateful weekend in 2005. There were hundreds of seniors and people with access and functional needs that were in the water while these houses and cars were floating around. Many of them were told that they had to self-evacuate to get out of harm's way when the hurricane struck. And this is where the equity piece comes in, because, well, the reality is that, it was the last day of the month. And we all know in some communities, and especially New Orleans, which is one of the poorest cities in the country, that you just don't have an extra $120 laying around to rent a car, schedule a van that has a wheelchair lift, et cetera, et cetera. And so for many folks, it was, hang tight, hope you survive. And of course, knowing that the levees were going to fail in those communities because the Army Corps of Engineers had said so, and that they need to be replaced, unfortunately, that was a very tough decision that was made on behalf of those residents. And we actually have a lot of San Franciscans whose family are from Louisiana, specifically New Orleans, who lost family members in the 9th Ward. And to some extent, that loss has inspired the work here in San Francisco, 2,000 miles away. So I always want to take a moment and talk about this, because we always have to remember that what happened in New Orleans was 100% preventable, and we can't bring those folks back, but we can do something to make sure it doesn't happen again. Now, while we certainly saw destruction, we saw beauty in New Orleans, and this, of course, is Hal and LaToya Cantrell, the two leaders from the Broadmoor neighborhood that we partnered with to help to rebuild their community. They wanted to recover as a community as quickly as possible, so they came together and created their own recovery plan. Those of you might be looking at that photo might say, wait a minute, I know who LaToya Cantrell is, and of course you do, because she's the mayor of New Orleans now. And that's just a really important statement to make, that during times of stress, people come out of the civic fabric and rise up, and through that challenge, step into the landscape of our civic platform. And so imagine that in 2007, LaToya was basically using grassroots organizing to save her neighborhood. And then here, fast forward to 2021, and she's leading her community in the face of one of the largest hurricanes in American history. And it just shows you how transformative this work can be, and what an honor it is to be part of that. So out of our work there, we actually decided to do something about it in San Francisco. So we created something called the Neighborhood Empowerment Network. The Neighborhood Empowerment Network is essentially all the organizations that you would probably bring to the table to help your community rebuild after an earthquake or any other form of disaster. And we put them together today to start to work with communities so that, one, we can make really great smart investments to mitigate the impact of times of stress on these communities. And then, of course, as well, build relationships with them so that when we do show up after a disaster, we're not exchanging business cards in the battlefield. We're getting to work and we're implementing plans and strategies that we've already agreed upon. So there's this, the soonest and the fastest deployment of meaningful resources, which for the vulnerable can be a matter of life and death. And here are a bunch of the organizations that have recognized our work: the CDC, the ASH Center, the UN ISDR campaign, and of course FEMA, and very much support their recognition and their ongoing support of this work. So let's take a minute and talk about San Francisco. And Crisanta and I were just talking about this a few minutes ago. I think all of us recognize, if you just look at the latest census data, guess what? America is actually getting a little grayer every year, right? And the truth is that many of those folks live in our cities, right? And so I'm gonna talk a little bit about San Francisco, but I would challenge that for many of you, when you look at the census data for your city that was just released, you might see similar trends. In San Francisco, we are a city that's aging in place. And so we literally have people that are either raising families and their families are moving away, or they're moving here and they're planning on staying here because, let's face it, there are a lot of services and resources that people want access to in our cities they can't get in other places. Today, more than 190,000 seniors over the age of 60 live in San Francisco. That's roughly 1 in 5 residents. But if you fast forward to 2030, 27% of San Francisco residents will be 60 years or older. That's 1 in 3 residents. That's an incredible number of folks to have in place in their homes, and especially when you recognize this statistic, that 30% of those folks live alone. And I think for all of us that just went through the pandemic, we now know that when you have a very large sustained event and you have this many people sheltering in place, there just isn't enough bandwidth in our first response community to provide the kind of support they're going to need on a sustained basis for an extended period of time. We've got to think outside the box. So let's talk about the box. So here's a house here in San Francisco. Bottom line is, like many homes across this country, guess what? There are lots of lifelines that pour into that structure every day that help people live there, especially when they're older and especially when they have chronic conditions or electronic dependent, that really make it easier to thrive and succeed in their household. Everything from electricity, natural gas, potable water, to even internet access and phone service. All these things make it relatively easy for someone to stay in their home, and if they need help, they can just pick up the phone and call 911. And or if they need to plug in their oxygen machine, they just plug it in the wall, and all of a sudden, guess what? Electricity comes out and runs their oxygen machine. Now, as we know, like in San Francisco, and I'm sure in Los Angeles and Napa County and anywhere else in California, there's a myriad of shocks that we have to start to prepare for. This list seemed a lot shorter a few years ago, but it just gets longer every year. Power outages, heat waves, poor air quality, pandemics, earthquakes, all of these are shocks that we don't, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when they're going to strike. And when they strike, in many cases, many of these lifelines are disrupted, especially during an earthquake. And this is when things get complicated. For folks that have the economic means to actually be able to store water and food and get a generator and have the physical capacity to care for themselves and their household, this can be a very inconvenient time and maybe a little stressful and frustrating, but maybe not a true threat to their health and well-being. However, for those living with chronic conditions and seniors and people that are isolated, this could be a very dangerous time. And so what you see in many communities is that these neighbors often do try and reach out to each other and see if they can get support. Now, sometimes the people on their block are experiencing the same impacts and have the same medical and health and economic conditions, and frankly, aren't necessarily able to help each other. But in many cases, what you have is a blended community. And so some residents have a better capacity to help others than the others that may not. So the truth is that we really see neighbor engagement as really being that first line of support that people look for during times of stress, especially if the phones aren't working, because there's really few other options to reach out and secure help if you're unable to communicate with our very important first responder community. So let's talk about sheltering in place. Sheltering in place is kind of complicated. The truth is that, you know, when you have a large residential fire, and I'm sure we've seen these on TV with 28 families dislocated from or displaced from their housing, you know, we set up a shelter, we collapse onto those folks, we provide them services and resources and emotional and financial support. And that's really actually something that we do really well. But as we saw in the pandemic, all of a sudden we had literally tens of thousands of people in their homes unable to leave and secure services and resources due to the health orders. And they were there for weeks, now months, now even a year. And the truth is that there just isn't the infrastructure in government to provide meaningful, sustained wellness checks on them at the velocity and level and detail they need. And so this is a big challenge when it comes to times of stress. Incidentally, this photo on the left you see here is from basically what I guess they call it Orange Day or whatever. It was last year in the wildfires when they struck San Francisco. And it was so smoky in San Francisco that they actually turned on the street lights so people could drive. And you can imagine if you're sheltering in place and a senior after months of the pandemic, how stressful that must have been. Again, I'm talking about the wellness checks. And the other key thing is psychological first aid or psychological support. We all know that, frankly, sheltering in place when you're isolated and alone, it can be a very stressful experience. And for many seniors that are aging in place, a sense of isolation, if it wasn't already in place, could increase because of their inability to have their grandchildren come over or take a walk in the street or even go to the store and see their favorite checkout person at the supermarket. All those things were taken away from them. And neighbors stepping in and providing that emotional support, in many respects, can be that lifeline they need that impacts the rest of their health beyond just their mental health. So what's the opportunity? Right? Well, the truth is there's always opportunity. This is the land of opportunity, right? So in looking at this model, we need to make investments today for a stronger and safer tomorrow. And the truth is that, you know, that's really the secret. Today, pre-event is when you have to do the work. Post-event is when you leverage the work. Here's what we believe in the Neighborhood Empowerment Network we need to increase. We need to increase the readiness of everyone, regardless of their socioeconomic condition, health, or mobility. We need to increase the level of connection and trust between government, community organizations, and neighbors. We need to increase the capacity of community organizations and residents to work as a team to help their clients and neighbors during times of stress. And lastly, and I think this is the most important thing, we gotta put fun back into this business, right? I mean, let's face it, like people are already stressed out just watching the news and seeing what's happening all over the world. And when you say, hey, we need to get together and talk about getting ready for a disaster, they're like, really, I'm kind of exhausted just by, you know, doom scrolling in my social media feed. I don't know if I can handle any more information about what's going to happen and what's going to happen potentially to me and my family. So we got to figure out how to wrap this in fun. And I think we've done that in San Francisco, and I'm really excited to share that data. So the Neighborhood Empowerment Network, in lieu of these challenges, we launched something called the Empowered Communities Program. And our vision is all residents, regardless of socioeconomic conditions, shall receive year-round culturally competent preparedness support and get the help they need to maintain their health and well-being during times of stress. Not too radical. I think it's a reasonable mission. I would argue that everybody in our business has the same mission. I know with Crisanta's leadership, this is actually happening in Los Angeles, and we're really lucky to have her and her team down there doing that work. So let's look at the Empowered Communities Program, because this is kind of our secret sauce, right? Because look, this preparedness work isn't new. It's been going on in communities around this country for decades. And the reality is that some communities respond to it really well, and other communities, maybe not so much. And so we sat down with some of the communities that we felt maybe to date historically haven't really responded well to some of the preparedness strategies that we've taken on. And they gave us some really great feedback, and this is how we reflected back to them. Here's what our approach is. One, we plan with people, not for them. When we go into a neighborhood, we go with a blank piece of paper. We have a whole set of questions that we ask that make sense, but we don't come in with a plan and say, here's how you fit into our plan. We say, how can we fit into your plan? And they say, we don't have one. Then let's say, well, let's write one together. Then once we find out what they want to do, and we learn that we don't have a program already in place, like our fantastic NERC program in San Francisco, probably all of you have CERT in your communities as well. The truth is that we actually create programs and strategies with our leaders in our community. So we design with people, not for them. And many of the programs that I'll share here later were all developed in partnerships, including the next big program that we're going to be pushing out called the Strong Block program. Lastly, I mean, let's just be honest, man, we've got to make everything scalable and duplicatable and sustainable. We can't just keep building one-off strategies and systems for every single community, given how much budget we all have to work with. And I know all of us, despite the importance of our work, struggle a little bit with our budget. We've got to build something that's going to work everywhere and really be sustainable.
There should come too, but
Oh, see, someone's already excited. They're laughing at how the brilliance of all this. Now, we need to also offer real value for stakeholder organizations from all sectors and all levels. And we all know that even within government, when we partner with other agencies, we need to demonstrate the benefit and impact that this work can have on them so that they will contribute and participate. I often point that many of the work that we're doing in San Francisco, frankly, also is mirrored by the work we're doing around community policing. So to some extent, it'd be great to just partner with our community policing partners and see if we can leverage some of the activities they're doing and vice versa to amplify both of our important missions. And then lastly, we need to drive ownership at the neighborhood level through the transfer of power. We need to always remind folks that they can't give up the responsibility of surviving a disaster or protecting their neighbors during a disaster. They've got to take on that responsibility, and then we have to help them succeed. Incidentally, here's my cat. Hello, kitten. And so the bottom line is that this is an essential step in our work, and it really has been gratifying to see our neighbors, our neighborhood leaders embrace this responsibility and take it on, because they truly do want to contribute to this mission. They just need an opportunity to learn how to do that. So with that, we create something called the Hub. And the Hub really is the network that we assemble in our communities to do this work. How do we do that? Well, the first thing we do is all of you that work in communities, when you walk into a neighborhood, you probably know 10 or 15 people that are really committed to stewarding the neighborhood. They may not be working every day on disaster resilience, but they are working on land use, transportation, public safety, health, economic development, education, or just general community building. And so what we do is we identify all of those folks. We say, you're the stewards of this community. You know the most about this community. Let's sit down and let's talk about this community. And what we do is we pull out this map and we asset map the neighborhood. So on the left, we say, these are all the mission critical resources you'll need to access after a disaster. Who right now in this community is responsible for managing these resources? Under food, the supermarket. Under water, the supermarket. The shelter could be a local faith-based organization or a nonprofit. Where are the medical clinics? Are there any construction companies that have equipment and gear? Then we pivot over to the right and we say, okay, now who serves the most vulnerable neighbors in these communities? For example, who are the families serving CBOs, seniors, children, people with access and functional needs, and pets? Because as we know, after Katrina, that was a major lesson learned, that while pets may not seem to be captured in our census tracts, the reality is for many folks, their pets are just as much as part of their family as anyone else. And the bottom line is, if you're not building into your strategy the ability to support pets and their owner and their guardians, as you would say, you're probably going to have the same structural flaws that we saw in New Orleans. We then take all the folks that we identify on that map in that exercise, and we present this opportunity. We say, here's how we see this being shaped up in your community. At the center of your neighborhood, we want to identify an anchor institution. This is an organization that, frankly, people all look to in the community as being a convener and a leader when it comes to their mission critical issues. It could be a neighborhood association, it could be a nonprofit, it could be a faith-based organization, it could be any type of organization, as long as they have the political footing that people see them as being the leaders in their community. Of course, then we have the Hub member organizations. These are all the other agencies and organizations that are part of that network. And then the outer ring, of course, the BC, those are our block champions. And these are the folks that we look to every day at the block level to lead their community towards a more resilient condition, and during times of stress, be there to help their neighbors. Post-event, what we do is we establish what we call the NEOC, which is the Neighborhood Emergency Operations Center. And the NEOC is staffed and run by local organizations working with our first responder community, but really managing the hyperlocal care and shelter work to make sure that it's done in a culturally competent way. The nonprofits and faith-based organizations that can reopen and serve the community are called neighborhood support centers. And at the block level, we're setting up what we call block support centers, which coordinate the actions of the neighbors as they work to help their other neighbors shelter in place and either mitigate the impact of the disaster or overcome the immediate impacts they've experienced as a result of the disaster. The way we keep this network going is every year we bring all those folks together and we run this exercise called Run Your Resilient Bill. And this is an actual neighborhood in our city, the Ocean Avenue neighborhood. And what we do is we bring the stakeholders together from along that corridor and we put them in a room and we run this exercise. And we challenge them on how to set up a central shelter and identify what their needs are and where they can find them in their community. And then we challenge them to try and figure out how to help people shelter in place. And we say there's over 250 people sheltering in place. How can you help them? Lastly, we talk about how to set up a mass feeding strategy for their community and ultimately a command post. But the key thing is everything they want to do, they have to find those resources in their community. And the truth is that if they can't find those resources or those skills, those all end up in the gaps section of this document, which are the orange boxes. And those gaps then get folded into their resilient action plan. And every year we try and fill those gaps. And every year we come back and run the exercise. And obviously the goal is to run this exercise to the point where there are no more gaps in the neighborhood. They are now ready to help people shelter in place centrally or in their homes and feed folks and create that service bridge until the professional services can pour in, which we know in some cases can take a couple hours, a couple days, or in the event of a very, very large earthquake, it could be a week or so before we see that meaningful level of service restored in our communities. And that's where the communities, we hope, want to step in seamlessly, fill in the gap, and then pivot and then partner with our first responder agencies when they do arrive on scene. Here's our current hub footprint in San Francisco. We're iteratively working across the city. We focus on the southern half of San Francisco for a myriad of reasons, one of which is many of the most vulnerable census tracts are in the areas that you see covered by these dots. And we're really excited about the pending launch of the Visitation Valley community, which is a fantastic neighborhood that needs work. So I'm gonna hit pause there and say that's pretty much where we were when the line of sand happened on March 15th. And then of course, everything changed in this country. Mayor London Breed, one of the first mayors in America to call for a lockdown of our housing model so everyone is staying home and basically saying we've got to get to work. By then, the shelves had cleared out in the supermarkets. You know, we were putting up signage everywhere telling people to stay 6 feet apart. We jumped in and started setting up mass testing sites, ultimately became vaccination clinics. And the bottom line is that, you know, I think everyone remembers where they were that day in San Francisco. And many of the key businesses that serve our communities that sort of are the backbone of our civic networks closed down. And so all of a sudden, people really ultimately had to stay home and be home for an extended period of time and come to terms with the fact that it might be a while before we get back to normal. And so this was the condition that we were in. And as I mentioned before, for those with the economic ability and the physical mobility, that wasn't a big deal. But for the highly vulnerable that were at risk in regards to potentially picking up the COVID-19 virus, this was a very perilous time where for the first time perhaps in their lives, they were charged with staying home for an extended period of time and lost access perhaps to their in-home supportive care folks as well. And this was obviously a very stressful condition for them to step into. So the next question is, how did these investments at the NEN advances work during the pandemic? So I'm going to data out everyone here for a minute, but in the end, those of you who are doing this work, we all know this is the kind of data that defends our work when we sit down and try and justify it with community, with policy folks, and frankly, sometimes with our own internal financial team. So if you have data to prove that this investment is going to make a difference, that might loosen up people's decision to participate or support in this work. So within the assessment of the hub performance, we wanted to evaluate how our leadership development systems work, how our cross-sector network development systems work. Did we increase the level of social cohesion? Did we craft culturally competent readiness strategies? Did we really help them learn how to create volunteer and donation management strategies that would work during the pandemic? Were they able to effectively communicate during the pandemic? And were they able to offer care and support to their neighbors? And were they able to pivot? As you may recall, during this pandemic, we've also had a myriad of other shocks strike our communities. So were they able to actually, handle a battle on multiple fronts and really be able to do more than just focus on one hazard at a time? When it comes to the leadership capacity development side of the business, what we found was pretty exciting. 50% of the hubs retained 100% of their pre-pandemic teams, and more exciting, 60% of the hubs actually onboarded new members to help lead their neighborhood during the disaster. Lastly, 83% of the hub leadership felt that participating in NEN's ECP program increased their capacity to write hyperlocal plans during the disaster. So our model of learning how to assess, inventory, identify gaps, and write plans, that model pre-event flipped over and allowed the 83% of our hub leadership teams to do the same thing post-disaster, but with a real gap in front of them. Our cross-sector network development, 90% of the hubs activated one or more hyperlocal organizations or businesses or networks to support the needs of their community during the COVID-19 pandemic. So the hub networks actually worked and were activated around this important mission. Social cohesion development, 75% of the hubs shared that their pre-pandemic investments helped increase the connection amongst residents and surrounding communities. 75%. Hub-led pre-pandemic activities that increased the level of connection amongst residents that had a positive ability to support their ability to shelter in place. The top three answers were hosting block parties, doing readiness trainings. Those are the two. Oh, my bad. And awareness building activities. So basically getting out there and just constantly pushing out newsletters and social media posts. Crafting culturally competent readiness strategies, right? Preparing individuals to shelter in place. This was a big deal. Were we able to help people prepare to shelter in place? 83% of the hubs shared that their pre-pandemic investments had a positive impact on their capacity of residents to shelter in place. And the investments that were bound by time were information distribution, wellness check systems development, and training. So these are the three things that they did during the pre and post pandemic to help their residents shelter in place. And it was pretty amazing that many of these tools actually worked very well during the pandemic. And now they're being fine-tuned now that we're doing our after action reports. Increasing the capacity of neighbors to help neighbors sheltering in place. The top three readiness activities that we did to help neighbors prepare to help their neighbors, again, host block parties. We promoted first aid trainings, and we offered the NERC program aggressively, which is our version of CERT here in San Francisco. And those helping support other residents in their community, community-wide programming, so bringing in nonprofits that work with seniors in our communities, establishing the hub in the first place, and investing in cash and supplies in the community for people to leverage during times of stress. And then 87% of the hubs say the NEN's Empower Community program increased their capacity to support the overall care and shelter support of their needs. 87%, pretty exciting. Volunteer management.
Just 1 second, please. Just a reminder, if everyone could stay muted, there are a couple that people who we are continuing to mute you, and you're turning your microphone back on, and we're hearing noise. So please stay muted. Don't unmute yourself until later. And then also, Daniel, you have less than 10 minutes left.
Great, thank you. I will accelerate here. Volunteer management, 90% of the hubs recruited volunteers to help their response. So over 312 people were onboarded as volunteers by the hubs. 60% of the hubs recruited new volunteers for hub leadership roles in the COVID-19 response. So 54 folks joined the leadership teams of the hubs to take on this mission. And 87% of the hubs reported that volunteer management experience pre-event contributed to the hub response during the COVID-19. So setting up and running NERT or CERT teams made a big difference in their ability to help manage volunteers post-event as well. Donations management, 90% of the hubs required donations during the pandemic. The top donations needed were printing support, 50% of the hubs needed additional face coverings and PPE, and 30% of the hubs identified food as a donation they required or needed as well. 100% of the hubs in our network successfully collected general donations for their mission, which was a huge benefit to the folks they were trying to help shelter in place. Communications, 100% of the hubs also created strategic communication plans during the pandemic. The top audiences they focused on: vulnerable residents, seniors, residents in general, families with children. The primary messages they wanted to focus on: advanced messaging around what resources were available in their community and how to secure more information. and then also helping people understand in relation to the sheltering in place and how to help neighbors learn how to help other neighbors shelter in place. And also advancing volunteering opportunities was a big message that was included as well. Conveying their message, 80% of the hubs use electronic newsletters, 40% of the hubs deployed hard copy newsletters, and hubs also use the following platforms for message delivery: door hangers, flyers, social media, Zoom video conferencing. Some of the barriers they experienced was that 80% of the hubs did experience challenges getting information out. And frankly, 87% said it was hard to identify what people's issues and needs were because of some of the breakdown in some of the abilities to collect information. The key barriers they experienced was that a lot of the CBOs that supported vulnerable populations were closed during the pandemic for a myriad of reasons. And so they was unable to partner with them to learn what their clients' needs were. Also, language barriers became difficult to overcome easily, and the limitation on outreach activities due to the COVID-19 health guidance. Like just being able to walk up and knock on someone's door and talk to them was a barrier at a certain point. So in the end, 86% of the hubs said that the NEN's Empowered Communities program positively contributed to their ability to successfully communicate with their neighborhoods, residents, businesses, and organizations. 86%. Care and shelter support, 80% of the hubs had created a dedicated care and shelter team in order to support the needs of their neighbors. 90% of the hubs prioritized one of their population members with community to provide direct care and support, care and shelter support. The top populations that were prioritized were seniors and people with access and functional needs, people who spoke English as a second language, and families with children. They were prioritized to receive the first round of care and shelter support. And of course, the economically vulnerable, which were struggling to meet their economic needs during the pandemic. In the end, information, food, and medical and healthcare access were the top issues that people wanted to overcome. 80% of the hubs that created a dedicated, oh, I think I may have hit a duplicate on the slide. It was so important that I posted it twice in the presentation.
Hey, Daniel,
Actually,
3 minutes to,
okay.
maybe
This
get to NeighborFest.
Yes. Here we go. All right. It also informs it. So yes, Mark very accurately pointed out that we also assessed our NeighborFest program as well. Equally exciting information. NeighborFest, of course, is our block party strategy. You can see all the beauty on the screen here. And with that, what we found the data was really exciting was as well. And I'll push this through because we've talked about NeighborFest before, but again, NeighborFest is really about fusing together classic civic building activities with modern emergency management goals. We worked with our neighborhood folks to learn how to assemble a team, craft a plan, asset map their neighborhood for blocks and skills, advance the level of social cohesion in their community, and activate their street in a safe and coordinated way. Very similar to what we do at the neighborhood level, but doing it at the block level as well. During the pandemic, our host community was fantastic. What we found is 100% of our hosts surveyed believe that the relationship building component of NeighborFest made it easy to identify neighbors that either needed help or could help those around them during the pandemic. 100% of the hosts surveyed. But there's more. 80% of the hosts initiated a response to COVID-19 shelter-in-place orders in their community. 50% of hosts reported that at least one neighbor did need help. And 48% of hosts provided support to neighbors on a weekly basis. 71% of hosts knew that others in the community also initiated responses, and 80% of hosts actually partnered with those folks to continue the community response in their community. How did NeighborFest contribute to their success? 80% of hosts felt that NeighborFest was effective in preparing hosts to assemble teams for COVID-19. 76% of hosts reported feeling prepared for every situation they encountered while responding to the needs of their neighbors. 86% of hosts felt that NeighborFest did enhance their community preparedness for shelter-in-place orders. And 76% of hosts reported identifying new local resources while in COVID-19 shelter-in-place were in fact. So they actually asset map their neighborhood again and found more resources they could access in the disaster. So we had fantastic feedback, of course, from our community leaders such as Felicia Thibodeau in the Bayview, as well as being recognized Professor Daniel Aldrich, a global leader in the power of social cohesion, development, and disaster resilience. Each of them sharing positive thoughts on the work we did and have done to date. And I do want to recognize the important contributions that our interns from San Francisco State and USF contributed to collecting this information. Their advisor, Wanda Borge, who's now at the University of New Mexico. And of course, my partner and Trey Allen, who helped us support the assessment program. And the real heroes in this work, and that is all the community leaders that stepped up during the pandemic and were there for their neighbors when they need them the most. And these are the folks that lean forward in this mission. And without them, the success of the NEN wouldn't have happened. And in the reality, they are the NEN. And without them, this program is just a great idea. But in the reality is, after a decade of work, it's now a reality. And we want to thank them for their individual and collective contributions. And I believe that's it. And I appreciate the time to share that information. I know it was a lot of data, but frankly, the data matters nowadays. And so I felt it'd be exciting to share it with you today. So thank you for your patience. And I hope that it contributed to your own individual work.
Thank you very much, Daniel. We'll start with Crisanta. Do you have any thoughts or questions you want to start with? If not,
yeah, so thank you, Daniel. Again, so nice to be speaking with you and to be collaborating with you and to see all the similarities. And it was interesting for me that we've never thought in my program, in the Ryland program, to collect the data. And it was very powerful to see the percentages and the high numbers. So that kind of had me writing notes about, we just picked up some interns, and I think that's going to be an intern project. Is as we move forward, we're going to start really taking an academic view of Ryland and how it's either succeeding or what our gap analysis is going to be for that. So I found that incredibly interesting. Thank you for that. As far as questions, I see there's already questions up, so I want to go ahead and turn it over to our participants. I see a couple people have their hands up.
yeah, Michael, if you want to unmute, you can ask your question. If you've raised your hand to ask. Michael Torrey. Michael Torrey, do you have a question? Just need to unmute. Let's see if I can do it. I can ask to, maybe that brings it up for you. All right, Michael, you'll need to unmute, but you can also type your question into the chat. Is there any other questions? Either put in the chat or raise your hand. Anyone? Daniel, I know you've done the Neighbor Fest program in San Francisco for many years. And in fact, there's going to be some kind of really super big version of it on the anniversary of Loma Prieta on October 17th. Do you want to mention anything about that?
Well, our partner that we work with to manage the program, Livable City, is actually doing on October 17th, they're going to actually support over 100 block parties across the city. We're calling them Phoenix Days, and we're partnering on a lot of them. And it's just a really exciting opportunity after the pandemic for folks to come together and connect and sort of reboot some of the civic energy that we have sort of lacked in our neighborhoods and in regards to having fun and socializing. So it's kind of like a chance to get out and in the safest manner possible, start to restore that layer to our community. We'll be looking forward to launching our brand new program here, the new updated NeighborFest playbook, which we're now prototyping with these Phoenix Day block parties. And then our brand new program, the Strong Block program, which I'm excited to come back and talk about later, which will actually help people learn how to take the team they assembled for their block party and their relationships and skills and assets, and then give them a playbook post-disaster to actually repurpose those assets to help their neighbors shelter in place. And we've got some exciting partnerships that we're starting with the Red Cross and other folks, and really excited about sharing that, because I kind of feel like we need to help people understand that if your neighbor needs help and especially if they have a chronic condition or aging in place, that supporting them is important, but there's a real science to supporting folks like that in a way that doesn't traumatize them or traumatize the person that's trying to help them. And so we're going to get fully prepared guidance to help folks figure out how to do that in a way that makes sure that everyone has a positive, successful experience while they negotiate times of stress and are easily able to come through in a healthy and positive manner.
And I just wanted to add to that, Daniel, that you make some really good points about the barriers as well. In Los Angeles, we're running into a lot of the same barriers that you're running into. And I did have a question. Did you find that because you targeted via the census and your vulnerable population, did you find that it was that party atmosphere, that fun atmosphere. Did you bring in also houses of faith to your block party? Did that help? Were those trusted community members? What did you feel was like successful as far as who you invited to the block party to get people out?
Sure. Well, yes, absolutely. The faith community is a huge component of our work, especially at the hub level, the neighborhood level, because many of our houses of worship or faith-based organization provide services beyond spiritual in their communities. And so we find them to be an incredible backbone when it comes time for us to work with communities. They often are the anchor institution or have a huge political footprint in their community to influence the behaviors of their congregants as we really encourage them to take on smart investments that are voluntary. And so hearing it from their pastor or their rabbi or the imam is very important when it comes to getting people to change their behavior. I mean, certainly it's always great to have our professional campaigns and our elected leaders, but sometimes they need to hear it from multiple trusted sources, as Dennis Milletti has educated us in the past. At the block level, certainly we actually have had faith-based organizations actually attend our block parties and participate in some of our Neighbor Fest Plus events, which are neighborhood-wide events. But often the block parties are just, 10 or 15 families getting together. And if there isn't a faith-based organization on the block, then it's just the residents. But we do encourage our neighborhoods, even if they aren't a member of a house of worship, to go and meet with that house of worship or that faith-based organization and start talking about how you're going to work together during the pandemic. And we've actually seen that happen with our the Archdiocese here in San Francisco. Even the Mormon Church, with its churches throughout the city, want to build stronger ties to their community because they want to help these folks after disaster. But frankly, they don't have the relationships with the immediate neighbors around their campuses. And so this program is helping them start those relationships. And actually hosting a block party is a way for the congregation to do that and create a positive impression on those around them who may not have had an opportunity before to connect or engage with any members of the congregation.
Hey, Daniel, can you talk about how you've been working with other cities and places across California to expand NeighborFest?
Sure. So in partnership with the Earthquake Country Alliance, which we're really lucky to have here in California, so I hope all of you appreciate the immense benefit it is to have SCEC support this program, and the leadership of Mark, and of course the hard work of Sharon Sandow, making this place a great place to come together and convene. Yeah, we've been blessed to work with Bishop, California. We actually have a partnership up in Santa Rosa, California after the Tubbs fire. They really saw the importance of getting neighbors connected with neighbors, especially when it came down to the 3 a.m. Evacuation declaration and neighbors having to help neighbors get out of harm's way because the first responders were all deployed. So we've seen a lot of interest in NeighborFest, and we think we're going to see a spike in it soon, especially now with the upcoming updates of the playbooks. And while we all know San Francisco is a little different, we're a city and a county. When it comes right down during times of stress, neighbors and neighbors, it's the same everywhere. And even in our suburban community and our suburban rural communities, we're seeing greater interest on that. Towns like Cloverdale, California, for example, where hundreds of residents from the Bay Area have gone to retire and now live in these communities without a lot of family in the area, and really do rely on their neighbors during times of stress. And we saw that during the Kincaid fire, which I can come back and share more information on about how the community has responded to that incident. So yes, absolutely, small towns, large towns, cities, everyone in the end looks to the house to the right or the apartment below or above when they need help. And certainly we want to make sure when that person answers that call to service that they're empowered to meet the needs of that individual, or else what we can also see is them being traumatized because of their inability to do so. And that's the last thing we want, is have someone offer to help someone and then be put in a position where they end up getting harmed as well.
Thanks, Daniel. I just share that we were really looking forward to further expansion of NeighborFest with plans leading up to around March 2020, and then of course we could. Getting people together for block parties was just not a thing that could happen for a while. So we look forward to doing so. We will be providing resources and donated materials from partners for for furniture fastening items and such for the events. to support earthquake mitigation and education activities, working on lots of materials in multiple languages coming to the ECA website soon. So we'll have 12 new updated documents in 15 languages, including English. Super excited to be able to provide that. I know that many of you, you'll have an outreach event and then someone will come up who doesn't speak English or Spanish or maybe even Chinese and a few other languages that we might have, but really the top languages in the state, for your communities will be available. And so if you have interest in hosting a NeighborFest block party in your area and want to try that, definitely reach out to us at info@earthquakecountry.org as here, or reply to your email about this meeting. And Daniel, if you put your contact information in the chat too, daniel.homsey@sfgov.org, I'm just saying it. And then everybody, you can also reach out directly to Daniel. And any other questions before we start to wrap up?
I did have one question for the group, Mark.
Yeah, go ahead, Crisanta.
If you all can raise your hand, if you all know your neighbors, have gotten to know your neighbors and know who the vulnerable population are, just by a show of raising your hands on the reaction button.
Yeah.
How many of you have done that or know that?
Got a few hands coming up. Awesome. Look for the reaction menu, click the raise hand button. You may be able to find it other ways too. Awesome, lots of you. Very important. Thanks, Crisanta. Any follow up to that?
No, it just shows that, how important it is that we understand who our vulnerable neighbors are. And I'm so happy to see so many hands up, because I think that Daniel has hit the nail on the head, as we try to in Ryland, that as much as our police officers and firemen want to be there, all of our cities are burdened with limited, budgets, and we don't have enough firefighters and we don't have enough police officers to respond to every neighborhood. So in the first hours, it will be incumbent on us to reach out, get to know our neighbors, and know what to do in the event of an earthquake, a fire, and evacuation. So super excited to see those hands. Thank you so much.
We really appreciate your participating today, and look for email with the recording link to today's website or webinar rather, or just go to earthquakecountry.org /community, or you'll see it right there on the homepage, the link to it.